This next panel is modernized cultivation technologies, right? That's fantastic. And we're looking forward to hearing about all the new things and the modern things right now. And to lead this panel, we have the managing partner from Cultivators. Let's hear it for Sonny Marinotes. And everybody else, come on up, make some noise.
Are you taking the flowers away, or?
No, I'm making it more aesthetic.
All right, good morning, everybody. The coming 40 minutes, we will be talking about cultivation and cultivation technologies. For that, I think I have quite a broad range of different expertise here in the panel. So let's start with a really quick introduction round for my guests.
Hi, my name is Benjamin Matsuda. I'm a partner at Grow Pro Solutions. I'm a second-generation cultivator. Grew up in the cannabis industry. My dad cultivated his whole life. Cousins own brands. Everybody in my family, is in the cannabis industry. Grew up in houses, doing the whole thing, and now have grown up with the cannabis industry.
Mikhail?
Mikhail Segal, CEO of TSR Grow, and we're known for advanced LED, remote-powered LED lighting systems and solutions. We've been in the business. I started the company about 17 years ago in LED lighting. Have a long track record in the space, and we're excited to be here and here with Sonny and ICBC talking to you guys, and really want to thank you guys for coming and listening.
Hi everyone, Darren Kaplan. I'm a managing partner at Sustanza. We're a full-service horticulture consulting company. We do facility design and operational consulting. I started out in horticultural research and cannabis production, so I have a scientific background, and at this point I've helped design over 50 cannabis facilities and helped growers, far more growers than that, so happy to be here, happy to have this conversation.
Hi, I'm Thomas Gibson. I'm the founder and CEO of Grandmaster LEDs. I've been growing since 1993. My first indoor was 96, and I have a passion. I've done this my whole life, and I'm committed to it.
Hey everybody, Dustin McLean from Parkland Flower International. I'm a cultivator from Alberta, Canada. Incredibly proud and honored to be here with such a great group of guys and just everybody. Been growing 32 years, been breeding for 25, and just really excited to talk about a lot of this stuff today with you guys. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks guys. Then last but not least, I will introduce myself quickly. I'm born and raised in a greenhouse, so all my life already in the greenhouse business. Studied plant sciences at Wageningen University, and about 10 years also now active in cannabis. And yeah, that's one of the topics we're going to talk about is also the transition. We talked about craft growing and the difference with actually large-scale growing. It's completely not the same. We had a quick intro before about that. This is one of the things we will dive into. But let's start with, also a hot topic this moment, energy. Then maybe coming back to you, Mikhail. How to reduce energy? What are your thoughts on that?
Energy is definitely a big topic, and there's a lot of areas that energy is important. In the beginning of designing a facility, many things and many times energy is a little bit overlooked, but it's the nuances in energy as well. It's the harmonics, it's the grounding in the facility. It's really the big things that are a lot of times overlooked that can save you save you energy in the long term. Equipment, how it operates. Like I said, the harmonics in the facility, and looking at how, when you ground a facility, you ensure that as things are turning on, the HVAC, the lighting, and everything that's coming on, and all of the different switching power supplies and how they come through, the inaccuracies and the inefficiencies of how they operate can really drive up your energy, the efficiency of how your energy is delivered. And so really looking at that as a key thing in the early stages. And then, obviously looking at the efficiencies of the systems and what goes in, and how they all communicate and integrate together, from HVAC to lighting, and even looking at the building management systems to make sure that everything can really integrate and focus together. thinking of energy in terms of consumption, efficiencies, and lighting is a huge component of what you use, and making sure you use an efficient amount of energy. And if you're in an existing facility, the energy that trying to reduce it is really to optimize light delivery. And one of those things, while it does increase energy consumption, but under canopy can help you drive how you adopt that energy and maybe reduce some of the top and really optimize what you do inside of the space.
Yeah. Dustin, you're actually running a grow. Where are for you the opportunities in saving energy?
A lot of what they just said, it's dialing in your environment, making sure everything's proper. Under canopy lighting has been a huge thing for myself. We're utilizing solar energy where I'm at. Yeah, it's just finding the best way. You just really got to know your facility and get guys to come in. If you don't know, get the pros to come in and check it out, because you don't know everything. And if you know your grow, you know how to grow. Sometimes it is good to get a second set of eyes, because they can really point out things that could save you a lot of money real quick.
Yeah. Yeah. What are you seeing? You're traveling the world as well, Darren. What are you seeing around in regards to energy saving, or what are things to really focus on?
I think we focus a lot on lighting, and that's kind of the obvious one. But HVAC, I think, is one of the most complicated and kind of mystical aspects of indoor cannabis production, because it's a very hard thing to market and sell, and it's very different depending on where you are. The local HVAC suppliers vary if you're in Europe or Canada or Thailand. And the HVAC has such an impact on every other aspect of the facility. So if you're using a 4-pipe cold and hot water system, you have a lot of control, but the capex is incredibly expensive, but you can save a lot of energy. So it's doing a lot of due diligence on HVAC. I think is something that we miss a lot, and we focus too much on maybe the nuance, the lighting spectrum, and things like that, where HVAC is a bigger thing that needs to be talked about more.
Yeah, I actually have literally a practical example what we had with a grow. They had all kind of offers from companies active in the growing space, but they went with a local one, which are doing it for buildings, but they don't see they miss that part of transpiration. And so that is a big mistake often made. They think they can go cheaper, but in the long run it costs way more money, because the transpiration rates are so high with cannabis, especially with talk about certain light levels. A normal system cannot work with that, and you're completely right. That is often the missing point. Maybe Thomas, what do you see in this respect?
I think one of the biggest things is using LEDs over HBS, because obviously they're way more efficient, and you're right away going to save so much power. And obviously sizing your room, your HVAC is super important. If your HVAC is oversized, it can make it almost impossible to grow well with LEDs. It's really tough, so that's one of the key things. But I think the biggest thing is using LED over HBS. There's no reason to use HBS anymore. LEDs can do the same spectrum as HBS. The biggest difference, I think, was just the factor of blue.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, we're already talking about light, but Benji, you're active in crop steering. What role light plays in there?
But yeah, there was a lot of things just touched on. I mean, even the energy, like Mikael just touched on, THD, right? So THD is going to help us, THD is going to help us for LEDs, because, and for everything that's plugged into the wall, because the total harmonic distortion, as it gets raised, if there's filters out there, like a company named Tune, right? And there's filters out there that can now limit that THD and help drive those bandwidths to the voltage that you are desired for 277, 347, 480, right? And so for these voltages, being able to keep those THDs in line, that's also going to help LED manufacturers, with RMAs and other things like that, for a lot of dirty power in these facilities. So that's one. And then touching on, just energy efficiency into the HVAC side is super overlooked. That's why GrowPros now has an in-house HVAC company that we just started. We have an HVAC We have an experienced HVAC technician who's been doing HVAC for 20 years, just for grow rooms, done over 2 million canopy square feet in just Southern California. And so just those build outs, and then partnering with, different architects, Stanza, DRM, guys that have actually know the operations and the operation processes within these places to know how to design your facility efficiently is another overlooked thing outside of just energy efficiency, right? How your room is laid out, how your facility is laid out. And then talking to lighting, I agree, just the HPS, if you line it up on every single metric, from PPFD, we can now beat, HPS with LEDs. If you want the spectrum, we can copy the spectrum and have the exact same spectrum with more controllability. Everything within the LEDs now, if it was 3 to 4 years ago, I would agree. But everything within LEDs now is so efficient, and you have so much more controllability that it beats a HPS on every single level.
Yeah, and still we don't know everything because a friend of mine just finished his PhD on cannabis and lighting, but there's still so many questions around, and I think in that way we all need to put work on it and share also what we have seen, because that is sometimes a bit annoying from the cannabis industry. If you ask me, it's everybody keeps it to himself. And why is the horticulture industry grown so large? Because they were sharing. Of course, I cannot compare your grow in Canada with my grow in the Netherlands. You need to take out the points for your facility and how to implement it then. And that brings also to the question about spectrum. What is the ideal spectrum? And I think if we go around, everybody has different opinions. But Thomas, what is your...
Well, I would say that there's no ideal set spectrum. There's obviously a lot of traditional spectrums, but to find out what the true potential out of any genetics, you have to have spectrum tuning. To get the highest quality possible, a single channel light can't compete with spectrum tuning. The ability to use blue on demand in the earlier stages, just to keep the plants as short as possible, to keep the internode spacing as short as possible, to keep the stretch as short as possible, is just very valuable. And then to then choose a base spectrum that is the best for your genetics. And then having demand or blue on demand for the last 3 weeks to introduce blue back into the spectrum and then finish in blue is a game changer. Plants don't actually really like blue at the end. So when you add blue, the plants don't like it, and they put up a defense mechanism that actually makes them produce more resin. So having that is a game changer, and we're just seeing, by using blue, you're able to, we've seen people manipulate different terpenes and all different types of stuff. One other thing I'd like to bring up about spectrum tuning that's so important, when you're doing different spectrums, you need to be able to have anywhere from 600 to 700 watts of each spectrum, or else what's the point? Having PPFD, the right PPFD, is super key. So there's a lot of, I think a lot of deception in the industry where if a spectrum can only be like a few hundred watts, what are you supposed to do with it? So you really need to pay attention when you're looking at getting the right spectrum tuning light.
Yeah, and then maybe you're talking about, Benjamin, about far red. What is the role of far red?
I mean, everything that I agree. So, having multiple channels, the introduction of blue in the first 3 weeks to be able to decrease internodal spacing, to be able to use blue, for the ripening phases to push anthocyanin, hormone production, cannabinoid and terpene production is very important. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we've been studying a lot, with the far red, right? Introduction of far red. So using the Emerson effect is one of the, hot trigger points in cannabis right now. It's being used wrong, right? So the Emerson effect is, in the paper, it was paired with 730 nanometers, 660 nanometer, as well as whites to stimulate photosynthesis. What that helps the plant do on the wake up is stimulate both photosystems. So you're able to the plant is able to have more photosynthetic efficiency. And so you want to use far red with deep red and whites on the wake up, and just far red by itself, putting the plant to sleep, quote unquote, on the phytochromatic shifts. Right, and so these are things that are very misconstrued right now in the industry, and then being able to have control of all your peaks through your stages, your cycles, per your strains, your genetics, your environments, and your systems.
Yeah, and Darren, what do you see in practice?
Maybe a contentious point, but I find that growers maybe get lost in the spectrum, the conversation on spectrum. There's there's definitely proof that there's benefit to it, and to be able to tune it to crop steer with spectrum, all of what you guys said makes sense to me. But for me, it's always pick a PPFD, white broad spectrum. I would say maintain the ability to spectral tune later, but it's something that is that's down the road. The focus is on, I would say, integrating systems, so high PPFD, integrating HVAC, integrating your crop system, your cultivation system, so your planting density, transpiration rates, all that stuff, getting that dialed in, irrigation as well, all of that stuff before touching spectrum. I wouldn't touch it because it's confusing and it adds a variable that we really don't, there's so many different ways to tune it, right? Yep. And just a little bit affects everything else, and the other aspects like irrigation, climate, are more impactful for most growers, and they need to get that right first.
I completely agree with you, and I always say our light suppliers are the ones who should check it, and if they come up with real results, then we can adopt it as growers. Or you have an own R&D room, then it's a different thing, of course, but let others check it, and then we can implement it at a growing facility.
I agree. I feel like putting a dial giving a dial early on to a new facility on for spectrum can do more harm than good.
And especially with, we don't talk about genetics, but especially with all the differences in genetics, what I've seen in research, also at the PhD with my friend at Wageningen University, there are completely different things happening with the plant, which actually one disagrees the other with a certain type of spectrum. So let's keep it for that. But what is really next in lighting, Mikael? What are the things you guys are busy with? What is next in lighting also for you, Thomas?
I just wanted to say one thing about far red, if I could, too.
Oh, shortly, yeah.
I actually believe it's completely essential. HBS has 10.4%. Most LEDs, or a lot of LEDs in the past, didn't really have very much far red, or didn't have far red diodes. Warm diodes still have far red, so there's a little bit of it in it, but I really think that it's essential. And like people that use it versus not, and you do side-by-sides, can just see the body language of the plants. But obviously having too much can be dangerous. And like you said, doing spectrum tuning, there are spectrum tuning lights that you could do stuff to hurt yourself. So without having direction, it could be dangerous. But I'm saying I would like to think that most people selling spectrum tuning lights are giving direction.
I 100% agree. It's like a Formula One car, right? I'm not going to hand that to a 16-year-old and tell him, go drive, right? And so, like, especially with far red, like you're saying,
My son thought I said that.
and it's so beneficial, like 730 nanometer for cell sizing, cell proliferation within bulking, right? And then even within the first 3 weeks, it is very important if you want to induce some type of stretch. And then at what ratio is it actually inducing these responses? But being able to, as a manufacturer, being able to have almost like beginner, intermediate, expert levels of lights, right? So we have, fixed spectrum lightings that we have tens of thousands of models out on the lights, right? And we know that this spectrum works. But then talking about optimal, I don't think we even know what optimal is yet. And we're all at the tip of the iceberg figuring that out, right? With spectrum tuning, even 660 nanometers used because it's so readily available and it works for photosynthetic efficiency. Right, but you actually hit your photo inhibition points faster. The more you lean towards red. So are we able? There's studies and white papers out, in Canada and Shu Young Zhen at Texas A&M who've talked about bringing that 660 nanometer spectrum down to more of like an amber. And it's different things that other manufacturers, and even Grandmasters talked about.
Yes, well, I believe we were the very first company to use 2200 Kelvin diodes where you have actually 600 to 620 nanometer, and it brings up a good question. Is all red truly equal? Which I say no. 660 nanometer and 600 to 620, there's a huge difference. You get that yellow amber color versus this deep red. And we have seen that there's a huge advantage to using that yellow amber spectrum for part of the crop for bulking. And having the ability to turn that off is a game changer. One other thing I wanted to bring up, because you asked what's coming new, UVC. Like a lot of people criticize it, and I've seen it criticized by so many people in the industry, and it's because they haven't used it or experimented with it correctly or innovated when they were experimenting with it. I believe in the next 5 years that it will basically replace 90% of pesticides and potentially take over most predator bugs because it breaks the rules of growing. For example, like thrips were impossible to beat in a room with predator bugs. I have tested it. And even with systemic pesticides, it can be really tricky, but with UVC light, we can actually eradicate them, which breaks the rules of growing. So that's why I think it's pretty exciting, and I think we're going to see a lot more people implementing it in the near future.
I think the one of the things, I mean, with what's next in lighting, I think it's here, to be honest. And when we're, you know, what you guys are bringing up is so critical on the development and the, you know, as we drive the R&D into LED lighting and what spectrums to use. But really, what's so critical on facilities, and when we're designing and building large-scale facilities for cultivation, I mean, when we're thinking, you know, a club to thinking a GMP facility or GACP facility, being able to deliver recipes and being able to really take all of this knowledge and all of this spectrum, but really integrate that into a recipe that we can deliver specifically, consistently and repeatably to each light and to each room and for each strain that you're growing, that's what's, and I think that's here. That's one of the things that we try to bring in is really the ability to take, whether it's spectral or power, but really build a recipe for each strain that you grow. One of the things we're doing is working with breeders, and you mentioned the differences, but really bringing in that recipe for that strain, and then being able to bring that in through the system and deliver that to each room. So when you're growing in a GACP facility, you need to be very consistent and repeatable every single time for that strain that you grew, so that you meet the variations and deliver that. And that's one of the things we can do with, you know, with remote power and really with trying to reduce energy and really optimize its use where you need it, when you need it.
Yeah, yeah. Dustin talked about some of the science they do, and looking to reality. Where's the gap? What works for you now already in your facility?
Well, as was discussed, you have to know your cultivar. If you don't know your cultivar, what are we doing here? And that goes for crop steering, every single thing. Take a couple runs, get to know it, find growers' notes. The biggest gaps is the withholding of information, as we discussed. There's a lot of guys that hold secrets, and let the sun shine on everybody's back, guys. We'll all get better that way. Yeah, for myself, it's not just growing the plant. I'm here to farm trichomes. At the end of the day, I'm a trichome farmer. And so I need the spectrum that works best when it comes to lighting and HVAC and all that fun stuff that works best for my trichomes that I'm trying to produce. I see a lot of guys when they're steering get a lot of plant material and get a lot of biomass, but we're not getting a lot of trichomes because they're not steering properly, because they're putting 3 sensors in 1,000 plant room and not steering. You know, you do it right if you're going to do it, but the biggest thing is know your plant first. Know how to read plants. There's a lot of analysis paralysis going on in the industry. So many people are growing by numbers right now, and the book says it needs to be here. No, your plants are telling you it needs to be somewhere else. So the biggest gap I'm finding is guys are relying so heavily on technology, they're forgetting how to grow. And that's on my end. And so, yeah.
But maybe that's also a good question for you, Darren. How to use actually the data without overly complicating it, because that is what is happening often.
Yeah, it can be daunting, I think, for growers, because there's so much. You know, you're implementing an environmental control system, your lighting system, you have an HVAC system, you have independent sensors, often soil moisture or independent climate sensors. And you're inundated with data, and you also have to run the crop. That's your main focus. The thing that we try and help growers with often is just picking what data is actually useful and how to interpret it, and also to link it to the batch. And so using systems or creating systems where after you complete a batch, you have a compilation of your temperature, humidity, vapor pressure, light intensities, also cultural practices like canopy management, de-leafing, pruning, and how those resulted in a certain output. And if you do that on a batch-to-batch basis, and you have a systematic way of doing that, it's really easy to take that data and actually make meaningful changes. But the focus has to be on collecting and using data that is actually meaningful. So there's a lot of data out there that you can be collecting it over years, and you realize, I never looked at my number of irrigation events. That wasn't something that I made decisions, like I changed anything. So I'm just not going to put that into the system anymore. And then we have AI, which is a whole other conversation, where you can then put that information, as long as it's collected properly and it was meaningfully collected, you can make some even more impactful changes that you might not have thought of. That's the really big AI aspect here, I think.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest lessons everybody needs to learn is consistency is key in this industry. And so use the data to remain consistent and make sure everything stays the same. Change one thing at a time slowly. I see guys going, oh, I got this new thing, and they're growing this thing, and I'm going, well, where's your focus? Slow down, and you'll be much more successful. Take your time, because this industry it's not very forgiving, this industry. And you can be gone in 2 crops, and I've seen guys come in and out within just a couple crops because they're doing too much too fast. So just take your time, guys.
Yeah.
I was going to say, taking advice from somebody else or riding someone's wave, there's nothing wrong with that. And that's something, if someone's doing really well, I'm going to take everything I can from them if I can hire them and extract what they're doing. So I think that's a really good point.
And it's tracking data, right? Like you guys are saying, tracking IO points and then building the comprehensive harvest reports afterwards. So, I was 25 years old running a 200,000 square foot cultivation, tracking all the data and then making all these in real time. One of the biggest changes that I see from American market, from the German market, is the Germans actually understand the scientific method, right? You have Americans out here that are changing 4 or 5 variables at one time, right? So changing one variable, actually running controlled R&Ds is super important, and then making these these changes. Then building these comprehensive harvest reports and having controller systems that you can then take in a batch from a run, and it's not just about spectrum and finding the exact right spectrum for the strain. It's also, like we're saying, VPD, it's VWC, irrigations, NPK ratios. It's a whole triangle. So as I change one point, you have to change the other,
Yeah.
And without those, without those experiments and, design of experiments and really looking at data, I mean, AI is useless with bad data. Yeah. So, bad data in, and, you'd be going down a rabbit hole of trying to fix things that aren't the right thing. So I think it's, to your point of really being methodical, starting slow, really doing minor things and focusing on what you really want to achieve. And that's so important. I think that's overlooked a lot. The other thing, too, is collaboration.
Yeah.
So many times when you're building a facility, making sure everything's integrated, working with partners that are collaborative and really trying to build things up, and, systems that work together, lights, racks, HVAC, do they talk to each other? Do they fit? Do they, how do they go into a facility? So those are key things.
Yeah, actually, you brought up a nice point with also doing research for your own facility. I had a grower who actually had an R&D room, which he thought he was doing the same and is in his flower rooms. However, with the research room, he was half of the room was empty. So he was doing his R&D with 50% plants, and his flower room, of course, full. So that's around 90%, 92% filled. Yeah, completely different, of course. You cannot compare what you're doing at the R&D room if only 50% of the grow is filled.
Yep. Yep.
And that transition from small scale to large scale, that is something that not everybody understands. And that's where we come in, Darren comes in, we can then help to really, how to translate it, because you can have all the data, but how to translate this into practice is a second thing. And everything needs to be in balance for the consistency you were talking about this. And if in growing, if you change the temperature slightly, you need to change all the aspects as well to keep that balance. And that is the key in growing. And it's not a factory where we actually produce pens or so. No, it's living materials, plants, and that is sometimes forgotten by especially companies only active in AI. It's not about the technology. No, plants need to be first and technology second, and not the other way around.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And you mentioned it too.
Yeah.
Understanding the crop first. So one example that I run into all the time is growers can often start being heavily reliant on the substrate moisture sensors, or EC and VMC, volumetric moisture content. And I would never tell someone, especially a new grower or any grower really, to build a facility that is completely reliant on those sensors, because first off, you need so many sensors to get a representative sample on the crop, or even within a room. And to do that, it becomes prohibitively expensive. I think to get an accurate reading, it becomes prohibitively expensive to do it. I think they're a good indicator, but I would always encourage a grower to first do even just like a lift test consistently, build that into your process. Do pour-throughs as well to get the substrate EC and pH. That's a more accurate measure than the sensors anyways, and you can do many more samples, and then feed that into your data collection system. And then later on, you can do validations with sensors to see if that data matches what you're getting with pour-throughs, with the measuring leachate. It's just a much more accurate measure, and that's personally what I would do running a facility is focus on what gives you the most accurate information. If you can use sensors, great, but first figure out and train your team how to do it manually. Once they understand it, then go to something automated.
I was just going to say, getting a room to dry out evenly is an art.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And I can remember having one thermostat over, like in a 30-light room, having one thermostat over every single light and adjusting one fan at a time and seeing how one fan can affect the whole room, and spending hours and hours making one adjustment and then waiting for it to cycle to be able to truly get it perfect. Because if you have a thermostat over every single light, you'll have a rude awakening when you walk into most rooms, and you'll see like a 5 to 7 degree difference in a lot of different situations.
Yeah, it's pretty wild if you air mapping, that kind of stuff. It's so important. The little things that a lot of guys just kind of overlook because they're so busy setting up their grower, building, or they think they know everything. That's why I would call any one of these fine gentlemen in, because that's the lane they drive in. That's what they do. I'm not an HVAC wizard by any sense. I know how to quickly set up rooms. I know how to read plants like the Dickens, but I can't read some of this data sometimes because it's very confusing to me, and I'm going, but that's not what my plants are telling me right now. And so I'm going to go what my plants are telling me. I'm going to go by what I feel. And I cannot stress this, the best nutrient for the plant is the shadow of the gardener. You have to be able to read your plants, guys, or, well, yeah.
I think you hit it on. Sorry, I think you hit it on the head, right? I think we're having the reciprocal effect right now. Back in the day, it was getting a lot of these OGs, legacy growers to be able to understand and be able to even use the data. And at this time, we're so advanced that you have these guys that are relying so much on these sensors, X, Y, and Z, that they're forgetting how to even use their eyeballs, right? How to even use their hands. And yeah, you have to be able to do this in a hybrid approach, and being able to use your eyes with these sensors and validate the sensors is so important. You know, going off of just one 4-in-1 sensor in your room and it's off on humidity and temp, and you thought you were in VPD the whole time, but you were really at a 1.5 to 1.7 for 6 weeks, and you're like, why is this happening? You know, it's so important.
Visualization, everybody, you know, it's kind of like learning. Visualization is different, or how you see data is different for everybody. It could be on a spreadsheet, and somebody can visualize what that all looks like in a room, or you know, and you have all of the sensor information. But I find that, you know, in a growing area, visualization is very important. Infrared cameras are great for, you know, really seeing what that air and that temperature is doing, and then really taking data and mapping that into visual tools, because there are a lot of people that, you know, that can speak, you know, especially if you're looking at a plant and you're visualizing and really feeling what's going on. But the visualization is a good way to represent that and make that, I'd say, you know, get people to import that data and do something with it a lot better.
Yeah, that actually brings us to maybe the next point in growing techniques, growing aspects. What is a bit overhyped, like what you're saying with infrared cameras that can really help a grower. Okay, how I am doing with fading in, fading out at the end of the day with light in relation to temperature, because there often mistakes are made. But like other techniques or typical sensors, what is a bit overhyped and is not really necessary if you have dialed in other things well?
Keep it simple. I mean, there's so much, you know, being fed in terms of the next lots of widgets and buttons and, you know, lights and other things that come in that, you know, have a lot of features. But the other thing that's overhyped is that, you know, cheap is good. And, you know, really starting with a facility and building something that's the cheapest thing you can possibly build for CapEx is not necessarily the best thing. So that's an overhype, and we see that very often. Maybe not in, you know, in Europe, but there are some instances where you're just trying to get, you know, build something up, and then you want to spend the least amount of money. But products fail very quickly? Where's the support? How's everything integrated? You know, what are you left with except a redo and calling somebody in? You know, maybe they're giving you a call, Sonny, at the, you know, after a few years to come in and fix it, and what's going to happen is you're going to invest in equipment again. So really, I think there's a lot of tools that are overhyped, but, you know, just invest. If you're building something for the long term, and if it means building something smaller, but it's going to be quality and help you grow better, build it smaller and take that same amount of money. But it's overhyped is to really just buy the cheapest thing. Make sure everything is integrated and works well together.
We were just talking about this last night. It's expensive to be cheap. Yeah.
I would say one of the most hyped things is genetics are paying like big brand deals for genetics and overpaying. I've seen a lot of people overpay stupid amounts of money when you can definitely, there's lots of access to so many genetics out there. It's kind of mind-blowing, some of the deals that I've seen, actually, but that's one thing I definitely see.
I would say focusing just in general on individual elements of the cultivation system, focusing too much on your lights, too much on your irrigation, and not thinking of it as a holistic cultivation system and just system in general. It really has to be something holistic. So working with partners, if you're working with a lighting partner that will come in and do, you know, get it to understand your HVAC, your cultivation system, and all the groups have to be involved in that way. That drives so much more value than over-focusing on single elements of the cultivation system, because those don't tend to matter as much as long as they play well with everything else.
Yeah, and there is never one solution only. There are multiple ways to go to Rome, but also in growing. And for a certain facility where you have really cheap energy available on site, then you make different choices than somewhere else. So every location, every grower is unique, and it's never exactly the same. That's, I think, what you also have seen, Dustin.
Every grow has been different. Every guy grows differently. Every guy has a different opinion. So you do what's best for you. Do what works best for you first. Don't listen to other guys' opinions, but always don't change everything right away, because like I said, all the bells and whistles and stuff. So low and slow, guys, and just be farmers right now, honestly.
I like that. Do what's best for you and what works for you, and don't worry about what other people think. My last piece of advice that I'd like to give to anybody that's about to start a partnership or a business, that discuss every last possible thing with your partners, good and bad, what can go wrong, and every single responsibility. And this will keep your partnership clean and good, because I've been in dozens and dozens of them, and that's the biggest weakness that I have seen, is you didn't discuss one thing, or if something goes bad or something goes good. So just make sure everything is crystal clear, all responsibilities.
Yeah.
Let's hear it for the panel right quick. We're going to take we have time for one question. If you have a question and not a story or a declaration. Anybody? Where?
Over there, on the third row.
Oh, you have a microphone right there. Why am I running up? It's too late. No, it's too late.
Yeah, my question is about under canopy lights in bigger facilities like 1,000 square meters. Pros and cons.
I don't see any con to under canopy. To survive in today's market, you need it. We see a rock solid 20 to 40% increase. I've even seen higher, but I would say it's rock solid 20 to 40. So without it, you're only hurting yourself. There's just so many benefits to under canopy, from turning your small buds into big, and not having a color discoloration, or correcting the color discoloration through your canopy. So I haven't seen anybody do a test that was negative, and we've got a lot of people that are using them now.
The only thing I would say is make sure your team or you are prepared to train your plants slightly differently.
Yep.
I have seen guys that just throw it in and they have stuff just laying literally on the lights, and I'm going, why? So you'll have to change a few things, but I have seen nothing but positive results. I just started doing under canopy lighting 7 years ago, and people are like, what are you doing? And I foolishly went, you know what? They're all telling so I stopped. Do what's best for you, folks. So, yeah.
No, as long as you go in, I mean, the yields, there's no reason not to. But the environment may change. You know, you have higher transpiration, feeding, all of those things. So if you're adding it, do the R&D to make sure you have the systems in place to handle the things that you're going to need to adjust for it. But but it will be done well. You will have a significant increase.
All right. That brings us actually to the end of this panel. Thanks for the great question, because I think it's one of the future things in growing. I really want to thank everybody here on stage, Dustin, Thomas, Darren, Michael, and also Benjamin. Thank you for being here and sharing what you guys know. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
you
Let's
very
hear it
much.
once again. Thank you. Don't forget to take a picture. Here we go. Take a picture.